and welcome to this second edition of Building Life Science Adventures with One Nucleus. And I'm delighted to be here opening the event and going to be handing over shortly to an illustrious panel all about building people skills. But I think from a One Nucleus perspective, just to highlight the reason we do this conference and much of the other things around helping our member companies recruit and promote opportunities in the sector, is the fact that we have great science, innovation, and plenty of ideas. The funding's been great of late. And I think both from public sector to help build that innovation pipeline, but also in terms of translating that into patient benefit. But of course, nothing works without great people. And we have to find great careers, not just great jobs that people are motivated by and passionate about. But to be successful and move on with those and build those good teams and get the successes, as I say, you need really good people skills. So without any more from me, because I know Paul Branthwaite, the moderator, will set the scene, I'm going to hand over to Paul. And I shall see you all later.
Thanks, Tony. Good morning, people. The first question I asked when Tony asked us to put this together is to decide what the audience was going to look like. And we're making some assumptions here that we're basically talking to people who are really starting the journey of their career in biotech and pharma. But we understand there may be other, shall we say, more experienced observers also present. So if anybody wants to chip in, I'm happy to get that. Certainly you can put questions, etc., in the chat box, and we'll pick that up and bring it into the conversation. So people skills, what are we talking about? It's really a setting and how you operate within it. So I think in terms of navigating the waters of what is genuinely a wonderful industry to be in, and really it isn't as scary as it may seem, so convoluted and huge and all the rest of it. But there are a number of do's and don'ts, sensitivities, ways of communicating and networking, which you would do well to understand and utilize, particularly if you want to do well and be successful. However, it's for you to measure what that success is going to be measured by. This is not a seminar on how to climb the slippery corporate pole, but for doing well and being considered a good person to work with and know. So I'm going to go into introductions, which will be brief. I'm Paul Branthwaite. I'm a pharmacologist. I've been in the industry since 1979. I've had a very eclectic career, which is, I think, one of the reasons Tony chose me to moderate this. I've had 5 careers in industry, and I won't go into that in any great detail. But latterly, I've been a founder and a senior partner at tranScrip. tranScrip is a drug development house, and what we do is we help organizations, big and small. So, for instance, we work with 22 of the top 50 and about 250 companies overall to get where they need to go, because we have a huge amount of combat experience, as it were, within the tranScrip team. So that's me. I'm going to go to Anji next from LifeArc.
Yeah, hi, my name is Anji Miller. I'm a senior business manager at LifeArc. My training is as a gene therapy specialist for cancer. So prior to entering the technology transfer profession, which I've been in for 18 years, I was a molecular biologist. Now what I do is I help get technologies from the bench to the patient, and that's through the translation route. I also run a technology transfer fellowship program for scientists who want to become technology transfer professionals.
Thank you, Anji. Wow, 30 seconds, that's brilliant. So, Kathryn.
Hello, I'm Kathryn Simpson. I've graduated from being a chemist back in the early days to being a change leadership expert, so quite a career journey there. That's involved both consulting and line management experience with organisations such as GSK, KPMG, Unilever, Mars. And since 2007, I've been leading my own consulting business where I help organisations going through change. And I recently also have my book, Leading for Change. So I'm an author of Leading for Change as well. So that's me.
Sneaky plug. All right.
Got to get it in, Paul.
Yeah. Renos, we'll charge you later.
Hello, I'm Renos Savva, and I am a molecular biologist by background as well. Very virtual these days, but I'm still thinking the think. I have a research group at Birkbeck, University of London, and at Birkbeck I invented a technology and spun out a company that many of you may know called DomainX, which I incubated in my lab for 8 years. It's now a very successful CRO research organization. And after I came back to the academic fold following DomainX, I started a postgraduate careers event every spring and summer at Birkbeck. That's been running since 2009. And since 2015, I've been running the Masters in Biobusiness at Birkbeck. All of this requires me to keep in very close contact with my network that I built up during the DomainX years. And I'm very much interested in helping people who want to make the next steps in their career from the science bench area into anything they like, really. And so I guess from time to time, I play the role of, mentor, coach, or just guy you see down the pub or in a cafe with random people, because I try to keep in contact with everybody. So you've come to the right place, and I hope we're really going to be able to give you some good pointers today. Thank you.
Thanks, Renos. Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah Thorpe. I'm currently head of performance and planning within Abcam's commercial function. I run the team that provides data analytics, reporting and sales operations support for our sales and customer service teams. But prior to this jump into the business, I was in academia for 10 years. I was at the NIH first, and then a PhD and a postdoc at the University of Cambridge, where I studied intestinal stem cells in normal tissue and in tumor development. And my experience in academia was overwhelmingly positive. I benefited from great mentors and interesting projects, but I never fit. And it took a while of bouncing around for me to realize that's because the academic definition of teamwork and collaboration is different to the rest of the world's definition of teamwork and collaboration. And so I joined Abcam, I've moved out of the lab, and now I'm in a world where teamwork is crucial, and the sum of the parts is more important, is greater than the whole, and where my ability to network, to build relationships, influence is way more important than the fact that I can run a confocal microscope or a flow cytometer or build a PowerPoint deck. So I'm really looking forward to sharing my thoughts with you.
Excellent, thank you. That last point from Sarah is telling, largely because very few of us operate essentially solo, and it's that ability to integrate and work with people, which is going to be a theme running through the whole of this thing. So can I have the first slide, please? Okay, if we can go to the second slide, please. And the third one. Okay, so what we're doing here is setting the scene. What we talk in terms of life science and the cultural norms, we are talking about a very diverse set of places and cultures, etc., etc. We're going to tease some of that out and give you some flavour of how to operate and how different they are. So Sarah, the first question was all about silos, and we've already talked in the heading there about pharma versus biotech versus academia. So give me a short idea of that, what they are and how they differ, please.
This was my one, was it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, and I don't know, in my experience in academia, the silos I worked in was very subject specific. They were research group specific, and there was some cross-pollination between them, but almost an invitation only. And my experience at Abcam so far has been that the business and delivery of our strategy is dependent on an ability to move across the business, to collaborate cross-functionally, to feel comfortable going and have a conversation with our development teams or our research teams or our marketing teams or our sales teams. And I think to do that, you know, I don't know how to code. I'm not a computer engineer, but you know, you build on confidence. You bring your skills to the table. Communication skills, ability to influence, ability to have conversations with other people are all important. And I think just a belief that you belong and that you're contributing something helps you navigate those silos.
Thank you. So I think that's well put. And I'll point to my own career. I've had 5 careers, which meant I've operated in 5 different silos. The thing you need to understand from the perspective of people who employ you or people who want to partner with you down the line is that the greater set of skills and knowledge that you have, the better you're going to be able to support them moving forward. So don't be afraid of you know, changing track, as it were. Anji, in terms of the interactions in these particular sectors and the culture as a whole, I mean, what would you say would be the best thing to understand when you're interacting with people?
I think definitely the underlying rule is respect. But it is important. I mean, here we're talking about pharma versus biotech versus academia. Just like working in silos, it really does differ depending on the actual projects that you're working in and the culture within the team. I think it's important that any position that you take, one, you understand the standard acceptable behavior within that sector. So whether it's pharma, academia, biotech, but there is a lot of cross interaction between them. But then also depending on your mode of communication, so how you're interacting with the advent of COVID, it means that there's a lot of home working. So a lot is done virtually or done by email. And I think it's ensuring that when you are addressing anyone, when you're interacting, you understand what is acceptable language, what is acceptable interaction, but also because we're talking globally as well, this means across cultures, country cultures, as well as sectors.
Thank you, Anji. And just another note that respect, etc. Particularly if working from home, it's very easy to slob out. And there have been instances, you know, famous instances of people forgetting to put their trousers on and stuff, which is probably not humorous, yes, but doesn't engender respect. Renos, I'm going to come to you because you mentioned the fact that you love to interact with folk, and it's critical in terms of being part of our industry that you interact. In terms of how, if it comes naturally, and it obviously comes to you naturally, that's easy. But in terms of the importance, how important is it, even if you're not naturally attuned to it?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I mean, it goes without saying that if you're invisible, then essentially you don't exist. I mean, if you're a disembodied voice, people start getting really frightened. Happens a lot these days on these virtual meetings, but still, yes, you're right. You know, if people don't know you're around, and that counts at work as well. You know, if you never contribute ideas, conversation, never attend meetings, don't interact with people, well, you know, good luck with that strategy, because I don't see myself how it's going to work. But speaking to a point you raised there, Paul, you know, how does it come naturally? You know, it comes naturally to you, Renos. Well, you know, I'm going to speak, I think I'm going to slip across the 1C2A line here. But
absolutely, go for it.
Yeah, the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. You know, I was a very shy young person, I would describe myself as, and I'm not exactly going to be the first person to volunteer myself for X, Y, and Z today. But, you know, nevertheless, within, I've developed a great deal of confidence, and I've only done that through practice. So if I need to approach somebody for something, I'll do so, and I will always try to do so, as Anji said, you know, respectfully, and, you know, state your business, because there's a reason why you're going to be communicating with someone. It's all about communication. As I say, the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. And then people like Paul will say, oh, Renos, you're a natural at this. And I think to myself, phew. So if that's where you are today, then don't worry, you know, in 900 years, you'll be the same as me, as you would put it. So
probably not half as handsome, Renos, but that
thanks, Paul. I'll buy you a beer for that.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that before we move on to the team approach piece. I once didn't connect with somebody for a couple of years, and the first thing they said to me, I thought you died. And that's that's serious. I mean, you cannot. The lovely thing about LinkedIn, for instance, is that you can communicate with thousands of people very readily and keep that connection going. And people love to be reached out to. It's part of human nature. Anyway, team approach. Kath, this is your bag. So working in a team, what's critical for you?
Yeah, and I was just actually wanting to comment because on some of the other conversation that's just gone on, because I think it's relevant to the working in the team piece as well. And that is as well, you know, it's about you being confident and being willing and able to go out there. But I think one of the skills also, both in networking, working in different silos, working as a team, is understanding others' perspectives. So really going out and figuring out what others' perspectives are, you know, what is the common purpose? And I think that, you know, you also have this, Renos, in terms of understanding, and you, Paul, too. What are the other people? What's the other people thinking? What's their purpose? What would be in it for them in terms of having this interaction? And so understanding where they're coming from, what the purpose is, you know, and that comes in silos as well, right? Understanding why people work and operate in that way. So I think that that's really important. And I think working in the team piece, if you have this common purpose, then you can start to say, how can I contribute to that overall team goal?
Thanks for that, Kath. Actually, you've really encapsulated what we're going to talk about next in many ways, Kathryn. So can we go to the next slide, please? And, you know, if you look at the that series of bullet points in section 4, Kathryn, pretty much.
Sorry, we can go now.
And I'm not going to go into these in depth because I think these are standalone in terms of don't really need comment. The thing about what Kathryn was saying is about what's in it for people that you're talking to. That comes into what I call the analytics area in section E, which is looking behind the obvious. So don't necessarily take things as at face value. You know the old adage in diplomacy, trust but verify. And I think that you don't need to be suspicious specifically, but some people will come across as people who use you, and you have to be aware that of that. So just a small warning. Anji, you've already talked about interpersonal stuff, and the respect versus assertiveness, I think, comes out of that. So we don't really need to go in that in any great detail, but keep these all in mind as we go through what we're talking through with the rest of the stuff. I'll only pull out section D in terms of finesse. Bull in a china shop attitude rarely works. It puts people's backs up and then they become far less communicative and collaborative. So it is about understanding, as Kathryn alluded to, what's in it for other people. So it's not necessarily transactional, but there has to be a win-win in any interaction, at least in the longer term. I wanted to spend a little bit more time looking at presentations. And Renos, you mentioned the fact that you, being a shy and retiring type, I presume at the beginning, doing presentations was an absolute chore for you. And the other, anybody in that same boat, Sarah, Anji, Kathryn, was that the same for you?
Yeah, it wasn't natural. I mean, the thing is, also coming from a scientific career to a career where you do use your science, but you use it outside of the lab and you interact with you know, technology transfer is a mixture of law, business, and science. How you present yourself was completely different to how you would present as a scientist. And that's something that a lot find very difficult, because the thing is, you've spent years at university training in that technical area. When you're in this new arena where everyone dresses differently and you're more outward facing, it can be quite daunting. But I think one of the important things is that you have to really practice and find your own style, so you don't have this imposter syndrome where you try to be someone else because you feel that that's what's needed for that sector. So it's finding your own self, but within the remit of the acceptable behavior within your new area.
Really insightful, Angie. Thank you for that, because it's yeah, it's easy either to be go too far on the humorous side and become a clown and, you know, known for that, or the other side where you're bombastic, or worst case
introverted, where no one
you can't be heard. Yeah,
no,
can't get your ideas across. Presentation is about exchange of information. Whether it's a two-way street or not, it is still about an exchange of information where you are putting across ideas, etc., to an audience. So first of all, you need to know your subject. Secondly, Angie said it, you practice hard on what you're talking about, so it just comes out in a natural flow. And three, test drive it against somebody. If you're not used to doing this, get somebody to listen to you, do it in full. And see what their reaction were. If they're falling asleep on the sofa, you know you're not doing it well. All right. Navigating change. This is a very different scenario where, for instance, you've changed jobs. You're coming into a new environment. How do you navigate that? I mean, some companies have buddies who you can who show you the internal ropes, or you have a more formal mentorship program, but ultimately it's about investigation, finding your own way in that. So in terms of tips, guys, Sarah, any tips on that you would say to folk?
I think change is good. You learn when you're put in difficult situations. That's when you learn. When you're doing the same thing day in and day out, that's not where you learn and develop. And as soon as I realized that embracing change was a good thing, and lots of change, and not to be afraid of it, but just to see change as an opportunity, it marked a real shift in my professional development.
We are going to talk about the specific element about how to view opportunity, objective, which we'll get to in a second, but I like that insight, Sarah, thank you. Kathryn, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess if the first thing in terms of any change is just to navigate and understand what is it the environment, what is happening exactly in the environment. So checking out, going to talk to other people, there's this thing around when change happens, it's the fight or flight. But the second thing is looking around you and who's with you, who's fighting, who's flighting. So understand, because that helps influence your decision and understanding there. So go and check out your network, your stakeholders, your friends, your buddies, as you said, your mentors, Paul. So get their perspectives as well. Thank you.
I'm going to go into section 5. We could spend the next 3 hours on section 4, but just to let the audience know, if there's anything in there that you want to expand on, we're all available to be reached out to. So in terms of getting your information in the bag, as it were, in terms of networking, etc., do's and don'ts. I mean, do's, yeah, absolutely. You must network. You don't have a choice. Otherwise, you're standing still effectively. But Renos, I know this is very much your bugbear, shall we say? And I'm going to flip into 5B for a second, because there are specific networks for people like I suspect our audience is composed of. So, do you want to say a little bit about those networking opportunities for folk?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So, networking until you encounter that word, you're not as terrified as you will be. And then there's nothing to be scared of. So really the way that I manage this on my course at Birkbeck is that I do networkings. Now, networkings is any group of individuals who are meeting for a shared purpose, and we talk about it generally in a very business context, that we're networking around, say, a conference or something like that. And in these online days, it's taken on various different guises, but there's nothing like face-to-face contact. And why is that? Well, it's about that confidence building, I think. So speaking to 5B, the best place for, I think, students or early career people to start networking is amongst their peers. And Paul, you've put some names down there, Innovation Forum, Science Entrepreneur Club, and Science Innovation Union. And these are student-led societies. Their management teams, if you like, are drawn from student representatives, and the networking is very informal. In fact, even if you then start to go to professional networking events, other than the fact, as Anji said, that people are dressed differently and there seems to be a different vibe in the room, really it is all about, 4C, just being yourself. So once you've gone to some of these 5B peer-to-peer type events, you can start going to more professional ones. May I recommend One Nucleus Bio Wednesdays, just a plug for our sponsor there. And why not take one or two buddies? And why not, this is from Jay McLaughlin, the recruiter, why not, agree to split up, get together with small groups of people, introduce yourself, get over that confidence hump, and then you can always come together for air and then go for it again. So really it's about building your confidence, and what better way to do it than getting together with your peers initially, or joining one of our bio-business networking events. There's a couple of them coming up in the middle of this month. Watch our channel on LinkedIn.
And the upside, Renos, obviously, is that there's free booze and some food attached to that. So that's always
very often, yes.
Yeah, that's very helpful normally. And remembering my days as a student, food was always agreeable. Anyway, anybody else? Kathryn, Sarah, Anji, do you want to?
Yeah, I grew up very, very shy, but I do love networking because, and this is it was one of the multiple reasons why I didn't stay in the lab, because being in a lab with very few windows and only interacting with your colleagues is not that exciting. But the thing is, I can see one of the questions, and it was saying, when you network solo, what tip would you give? And there are several things that I do. When I network, normally a lot of the time it's because I enjoy doing it. I will go in by myself, but when I do go in, a lot of the time it may be breakfast network. It may be where, as you mentioned, there are drinks there. I may have like aims to actually speak to certain individuals, but I go in and I stand and I do scan the room. I scan to see where everything is. I also scan to see individuals who I know and where I remember that I'm going to have to try and interact with them at some point. It may be that I'll go and get myself a drink, not necessarily alcohol, it could just be tea, water, whatever. But by the time I get there, I will have a conversation with someone, and that's already started the ball rolling. For practicing, I do find that if you go to an event and there's an exhibitor hall, work the exhibitor hall. It's a great area to practice, because you just go along and you have to have a conversation with the individuals on the table, and usually they are very receptive. So it's a way of you getting the first sentence or two, talking about yourself. If you have a business card, you ensure that you get that across. With our fellowship program that we run, and this is for scientists who are becoming technology transfer professionals, I usually take them to conferences. So I'll take them to ASTP in Europe, because it's a very different vibe when you're interacting then. but also to the US, which is completely different. And that can scare the bejesus out of you. But it's a, you know, it's a baptism of fire. Eventually, you really do enjoy it because, you know, the US culture is that within a certain time, they will have given you their pitch. If you stay there thinking, you will be left there with the card and whatever delivery that they've given because they've moved on. So it's understanding that, you know, within that time frame, in your own way, in your own style, whatever you want to get across to the individual, you do that, and you do it succinctly. So you have to be efficient. Science requires detail, but if you're using science out of the lab and also you've got time restraints, it has to be more succinct.
Anji, you couldn't have put it better, and I will reiterate the working the conference hall, the exhibition hall. The people on those desks want to talk to you, and more importantly, they want to network you on, if at all possible, because they are quintessentially networkers by and large, and you know, you ask the right question and you can be put into in directions which you might not have even considered because they're thinking exactly what you are, etc. But the succinctness, absolutely, you need we call it an elevator pitch. It's got to be natural and it has to flow, and it's almost an automatic response to get across the idea of who you are, what you're about, etc., etc. Think of it like speed dating, except without, you know, the obvious upside at the end of the conversation, or disappointment usually.
Or downside.
Exactly. So it's it is about listening as well as projecting. You have to understand that they're trying to communicate with you, and you have to absorb that, and then you make decision on the fly if you're good at networking in terms of going off in tangents, etc., which is where some of us who enjoy this thing really shine. I'm conscious of the time flowing, so I'm going to move on to the next section, please, if you can change the slide. Okay, so we sort of alluded to the opportunity element previously, and you know, the question is, what is opportunity? How do you recognize it? And what do you do about it? And the opportunities can be varied. They could be completely off the wall in many occasions. The question is, what do you do with them? And you know, I'm going to ask the guys about their experience, but for me, it was always, hello, that sounds interesting, tell me more. But then using, you know, experience, etc., to do some triage. But the key thing, and I think Sarah, you said it, there's no point in being frightened about it, because if you want to move on, then sometimes you have to take, shall we say, that leap of faith. And when people, because I do a lot of mentorship, say to me, you know, I'm really worried this may be the wrong step. And my response is, who cares? Or to use the German version, na und, because it really, you take a leap. If it doesn't work out, 9 times out of 10, you can go back, get back on track to where you were previously. But if you didn't take that leap, you will always regret not knowing what that leap or where that leap would have taken you. But as opportunity arises, it's learning to understand that it is an opportunity. It's not somebody saying, well, I want to give you a job. It's they start talking about something, and you start to think, well, tell me more. Am I interested? Where do my skills, you know, et cetera, and just go from there. So going back to the panel, Kathryn, in terms of learning from experience and viewing opportunity objectively, what would be your you know, the go-to points on that?
Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? I think that you know, when I think about some of the experiences that I've had and learning from those experiences, you know, sometimes I've taken on roles that may not have been perfect for me. And I'm thinking, you know, that I went into a line management role from being a consultant, and I'd been in line management previously, but I'd been a consultant for many years, jumped back into line management and hated it. Didn't like it at all. But in terms of the experience that it gave me around understanding a senior leader's perspective on how you make change at the same time as handling day to day, that was huge to me, and that's been huge in terms of perspective moving forward. So understanding finance in more depth, again, big thing in terms of your future career. So I think it's always worth thinking about opportunities that come your way in terms of what's it going to help you with, what's it going to teach you with, and then be honest as you're into something. It's not working out, then consider moving on, and that's okay. So just being, I think, thinking about things like that in an opportunistic perspective and being prepared to take the risk.
I'm going to give some element of my own experience in terms of making that decision, because Kathryn reiterated what I said about, it's okay to go back. The only caveat I would raise with that is if you jump too frequently, you get known for being, you don't have stickability, and that can work against you. So, yes, get into something, learn from it, and then move. If you have a really coherent reason for either going back or making a change in a small amount of time, that is fine. But you have to have a damn good reason, which is checkable. Because if you've moved 3 times in the last year, people interviewing you are going to really focus down on that, because they're telling them something either about your ability to make decisions or your ability to stick within an environment where you aren't initially comfortable. So with that caveat, I'm going to move on to dealing with adversity and stress, because one of the things that is inevitable in any career line, that you're going to come across blockage, or certainly your company disappears from under you. You've got not just family elements to deal with, etc., and sometimes it gets extraordinarily stressful. So I'm going to talk about coping mechanisms. This is not universally applicable. This is each individual has their own way of dealing with that. But I'm going to come to you first, Renos, in terms of you've had a number of it's not opportunities, you made the opportunity, let's be honest, but within that arc of discovery, as it were, there was a lot of stress, and I'm sure there were points where you just wanted to tear what hair you had out of your head. I'm speaking obviously personally, because I am follicularly challenged. So give me some ideas about how you cope with that.
Well, I've kept my wig on today, Paul. So, yeah, it never stops, everybody. It never stops, right? I don't want to mention any invasions of countries, but, we're all stressed about different things the whole time, even if we're not directly involved with them. All I can say is, from day to day, everybody has their personal stress. So let's start there. How you start your day is really important. If you don't check in with yourself, at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, at least, hopefully during the day, you've got to make time for yourself, because actually stress happens all the time for various reasons. Personally, at your place of work, in your interactions, hopefully not at networking. Let's keep it sane, everybody. So you're right, Paul, at different parts of my career, I've had different stresses. So at the beginning of my career, my experiments just weren't working. And I thought, how am I going to explain this 3.5-year gap on my CV that was supposed to be a PhD? But then that worked out, right? But why did it just work out? Well, I just worked hard. I worked through it. I checked in with myself. I tried a lot of things, checked in with my supervisors, my mentors, and so on. Got myself through that. You're right, Paul, founding a company wasn't exactly without its stresses from time to time. The board meetings in the early days got quite fraught. At this burn rate with no customers like we are now, we may as well just all go home. But, you know, we pushed hard, we made our pitches, we did our BD, we got ourselves through, we got our funding. So, you know, these are the ways that you do it. At the university, you know, the government calls different changes, moves the goalposts, if you like, on the higher education sector from time to time. We've seen it with how people can finance their degrees, how higher education institutes are meant to fund their activities and so on. And so as academics, we have to keep pivoting our courses, moving them, appealing to new audiences. And then, of course, the pandemic hits, and suddenly, you know, you're in a hard place financially, and we're thinking about all kinds of different things that we might have to do just to keep ourselves level. So now back to the personal part, you know, depending on where you are in all these different situations, you will experience anxieties and stresses of different kinds. It's usually linked to a sense of not being in control. So if you're in control of anything, I would agree with comments from the last couple of minutes. What you're really in control of is, am I going to stick or am I going to twist? And I think really the power is actually yours. So don't worry about it. You know, you're worrying already. So how much worse can it be? Try something else. Check in with yourself. Be good to yourself. Check in with your mentors, your friends, your network, your family. Keep yourself level, because stress happens. I hope that's okay.
Thanks, Renos. I always think of the old adage, you know, there are only two certainties in life: death and taxes, and everything else is under, you know, to a degree, your control. Sarah, I mean, I not knowing much about your career line, did you have points where you needed to get through something, or you found yourself overstressing or just being stressed about a scenario, and how did you cope?
Yeah, definitely. I think I saw something on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago. The first thing to say is a PhD is not a measure of intelligence. It's just the fact that you can do something hard. You can stick at something and for a long time and get to an outcome. And, excuse me. That's what I go back to time and time again when I'm facing something difficult at work. I knuckled down for 4 years and was the only person working on one project and saw it through to the end and got to the other side. So I can deal with the meeting coming up, the issue in my team, whatever else it is. The second part of that, though, one of my favorite expressions is there's worse things that happen at sea. None of us are in any, I don't think, any lines of work where we're really making life and death decisions. And so that doesn't mean that the stress and anxiety that you're feeling aren't very real and that you don't have to take steps to manage it, but it's really important to have that perspective. And so those are the two things I try and hold on to: perspective and a knowledge that I can do hard things if I put my mind to it.
I'm going to use that as a segue into the last point in terms of using others, either for decision making or essentially using the people who've got, you know, either a wider experience or just a different experience may be able to give you some degree of perspective if you're in a stressful scenario, or to quote Renos, you know, just get out of Dodge. You know, love it or leave it, you know, and that's a good adage to go. But let's talk about the decision making and the use of other people as shall we say, your advisory team. Now that can be formalized or it can't. Anji, going to you, I mean, have there been people in your life who've been influential in terms of you making decision making about careers or your love life or anything of that nature? You know, it's the concept I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, absolutely, and I do this a lot for both my friends, colleagues, and the fellows that I have on my program. But I find that, and I'd like to touch on anyway, the adversity and stress. A lot of the time, and it's the same individuals that you'd probably use, you will have very good friends who will have your back. They may not be in your sector, but sometimes it's good to just talk to them. I think, you know, if you are feeling stressed, you should talk to someone, because sometimes it can be where you are building something up inside and it can be overcome. And it's just understanding another perspective. With regards to decision making, I've made a lot of choices like where a lot of people thought I was crazy. You know, when you're very good at something and you're doing very well and you spent a long time getting there, you know, for me in that case, it was being in a very, very well-respected lab after all that work. And then to say that I'm going to use my technical skills outside of the lab, it's just, people just thought I was crazy. And then after having like so many degrees, I had 3 degrees, and then I went and did a master's in intellectual property law. They just thought, why would you do that? But I had a plan, and this is what I'd say to everyone. You will have a plan, and it can't be rigid. But the thing is, have some sort of plan with what skills you want to build up and what experiences. And I think that reads into also when you make your choices, if opportunities come your way, it may be because you want to build up a particular skill. People may not understand it, but if you are comfortable with that, then that's fine. But you need to have someone where you can just get sense check, but also where they're going to ask you questions, they're going to be open. And it could be where they ask you questions like, why are you doing it? Are you doing it to impress this person, or are you doing it because you really want to? And I think by having someone that you can talk to on that sort of level, it will help shape your decisions. But, you know, sometimes taking risks really does help. I find that when I have a knockback, I usually rise much stronger and much higher than I would have done if path was smooth. And that's just me. And that's just looking back that I found that.
I'm full of aphorisms, I know, but you know, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, in my case, it does.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that as well, Paul?
Yeah, go for it. I was going to come to Kathryn.
Yeah. Because I think that what Anji said about have a plan is just so important, and it's kind of linked back again to, you know, discovering your purpose and using others to help you clarify what that purpose is just so important, because then if you can clarify that and you're motivated by that and you can keep your eye on that goal, what is my purpose and how therefore do I get towards that? And then aligned with that is what is my strengths, and understanding what's got you through in the past. So that's to your point, Sarah, you know, those strengths that you have innately, just being very clear about that. So when that you come to a difficult situation, you remember your purpose, and you also remember, you know, the great strengths that you have, which will take you towards that, meeting that purpose.
I will add something to that, and again, using a military term, a battle plan doesn't survive contact with the enemy. And what it means is that your plans, and Anji said it, they can't be set in stone, because opportunity will A, take you off at a tangent, but B, if you have an E-day fixate, you will miss opportunity. That comes your way. So it's all a balance. And I will say one thing about, and then I want to go to questions from the audience. When we say how to use others to help in your decision making, you have to remember that ultimately the decision making is yours to make. Mentors, a good mentor will simply ask you a series of questions so that you are ready in your own mind to make that call. And they should not try to necessarily guide you towards any particular decision. What they should be there is to try and stop you making a catastrophic decision. But ultimately, it is all your decision. And Anji is a case in point where everybody around her would probably think she's completely off her trolley for making the decisions she made. But she made them, and she not only lived with them, she thrived with them. So don't be afraid to go against the grain in terms of what anybody you're talking to. But her other point is, you know, use your out of service network as an emotional support, because that's equally important. So in the last few minutes, because we've only got 9, I'm going to, before we go to any anecdotes that we were going to make people laugh with in terms of our own career disasters, are there any questions from the audience? I can't see anything in the chat room.
There's one in the chat bar from Mark Fisher.
I can't see that.
So asking, many people
I
going
got it. Yeah.
networking in pairs.
Yeah.
What's your tip?
Yeah, actually,
for entering a room solo.
That's a really good point, because that, if going in pairs is one thing, but approaching pairs is the other aspect of it. Because if you intrude into a conversation which is already undergoing, it's less intrusive than you walk up slap bang to somebody cold and say, yeah, who are you and what do you do, sort of thing. So I agree with you that coming into a room with a pair is helpful. However, what I would also see, if you have if that pair has a dominant and a non-dominant, you know where that conversations are going to go. So you have to be able to strike off on your own. Any thoughts, guys?
Building on what Anji said, my PhD supervisor would never let us attend conferences in pairs. If we wanted to go to a conference, we had to go by ourselves.
Yes.
That's partly because networking is uncomfortable, but as Anji said, you build up the confidence, you scan the room, you make your plan, you decide who you want to talk to. It's uncomfortable for all of us to approach someone, and even the most extroverted in the room will find it difficult to approach someone cold. But you have to remember what you're there for, what you're trying to get out of the event, and just lean into it.
It is very easy, pair, to reiterate what Sarah is saying, for that pair simply to talk to each other, and that's not getting you anywhere.
Yeah.
You have to split up. If you're going in a pair, you have to split up. If you're going in a group, you have to split up. By all means, catch up with each other now and then. Yeah. I mean, my tactic for solo networking, Mark and everybody, is look up. When you enter the room, look up. There might be somebody you know. And if there's nobody you know, somebody's going to smile at you or make eye contact with you. And that's the person you're going to start talking with. And that will just get your breath going, your vocal cords going, and you're off.
I give one example where I think it does work, is if you have a shy, retiring person with you, you make the introduction and then you leave them with the group that you've introduced to them, because then they're not like a deer in the headlights necessarily, and then you can regroup and do it again. One of my most senior colleagues is intrinsically extremely shy. I mean, when she gets going, you can't stop her. But quite often when we're working conference together, I will do that, because I know that once she actually gets into conversation with people, she's fine. It's that initial hurdle. So that's the only caveat I would make to that. So I hope that's helpful, Mark. Okay, we've got literally 5 minutes left, and we've talked about networking, we've talked about mentorship, we've talked about taking control of your own development, and we've talked about taking risks. So if we can go to that last slide, please. In a minute, Kathryn, can you give me, on any of those topics, an anecdote which is illustrative?
I don't know that it's funny though, Paul.
That's all right. Yeah, it doesn't have to be funny. It can be sad.
Yeah. I talked about the taking risks and going into line management, so I won't cover that one. But I guess the networking one that I maybe want to reflect on is kind of internal networks as well. And working for big organisations like GSK, one of the things that was incredibly valuable to me was to have a big network that I knew what everybody did, not everyone, but enough people that were in my areas did, so that when an opportunity arose, I was able to pull on people who I needed to come and help me. So I would just say, go out and talk to people, understand what it is they do, understand, how potentially it's not just about the here and now, how can you help me, but how can you help me in the future? Or how can I help you in the future? So kind of keeping that and keeping the, and there's just the question from Imogen as well that relates a bit to that, keeping in touch with them and knowing what I need from them. Yeah, that's the hard thing, and I think thank goodness for LinkedIn on that. But yeah, that would be just trying to understand how your circles of expertise. You know, I always imagine a Venn diagram. This is what I can do. This is what others can do. And how does that intersect? Where's that intersection? And let's try and figure out how we can work together or collaborate in the future.
And going back to A-level maths there, I recall having almost a fight on a British Airways flight back from Basel with one of my colleagues as who was going to sit next to Richard Sykes, who at the time was head of GSK, and I won. Anyway, moving on. Renos, a minute on any of those topics.
Yeah, so I think I would say taking control of your own development. And again, to answer Imogen's question in the chat bar, as Kathryn has already started, I would say you just have to keep on at those relationships. Relationships develop over time, just as your development is something that matures over time. And we heard Anji talking about taking risks, so I'm not going to talk about that, but I am going to say that, Anji, when you took your risk, you know, that didn't happen in a flash of light. And therefore, you know, whatever we do, whether we're networking or whether we are developing our career in a new direction, it's going to take time. And you are actually in control. I mean, Paul, you said it before, you know, you're ultimately where the buck stops. So keep checking in with yourself, keep asking yourself, what is it you want? What is the weather out there? Who do I know? Who should I be talking to? And make it happen. It will take time, but it will happen if you want it.
Sarah, we literally have 2 minutes, so
just to build on what Kathryn and Imogen said, and Imogen's question, I think one of the harder bit is actually building those connections and meeting those new people. Once you've made that connection, you have it, and you can go back to them at any time. You know, that is the power of LinkedIn. You don't necessarily need to be talking to everybody all the time. You need to be constantly growing your network and knowing that you can. You know, I'm speaking to someone at 4:30 today that I only just found existed in the business. I probably should have known she existed in the business a couple of months ago. Well, I didn't, and I know now. And we're talking at 4:30, and I'm sure there will be commonalities between our roles. And I might not speak to her again for 6 months, but it's about as Renos said, checking the weather out there, knowing who's out there, and then being able to dip in and out when you need to.
thank you. And finally, Anji.
I'd say take control of your own development, know your strengths, but also know what your weaknesses are and the skills that you do need to acquire. And this falls in line with the plan that you need to have. The risks that you take in point 4, they should be calculated risks. And if you can find a mentor, it will take time to find the right mentor. And it may not be in one individual that will cover all aspects. But the thing is, do it. With networking, it's going to be uncomfortable, but dive in. Yeah. You will float eventually. So I think that's just it for me.
Anji, thanks for summing that up, because you covered a lot of bases in a very short space of time in that segment. So to iterate what we talked about, yes, strengths, know your weaknesses, make sure your weaknesses are relatively small beer and you can address those down the line. Network furiously, get to know people, be kind to people, because ultimately they will be kind back. It's the great karma thing that I genuinely believe, is that you, on your way up, be nice to people above and below you, not just above you, because, you know, turn and turn about. If you don't, you do get a reputation. This is a small, incestuous business, people, and you need to get a reputation for being straight, kind, helpful, and willing to put yourself out. And then if you do that, ultimately you'll be fine. Any other comments from anybody? Because I think we are pretty much up to speed on that one. We're a minute over. My God, given the subject, I think that's pretty good. I'm done.
Okay.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you to all the panelists. Indeed, I looked some great insights. I think what it reminded me of in that was that quite often sessions like this and events, we target at at students building their careers. Actually, there's lots of things in there to remind us all at any stage of our career. I think just in terms of how we go about our work and life generally. So thank you very much for sharing those insights.
And I'll leave
For
you
everyone
with
else,
this. I was going to say,
the
I'll leave you with one thought, Tony. When I look back at my career and I can think, I did what? Why?
Yeah.
You know, but ultimately, you know, I've had a good one and I've enjoyed it. So on that basis,
Indeed.
I'm done.
I think for everyone on the call and everyone else, do feel free to explore the app. You can still got time to vote for our Life Science Inspiration of the Year Award, which will close at lunchtime tomorrow via the app. And the next session is 10:30 till 11:30, all around how much you should value experience over qualifications, which I think we all probably struggle to balance with sometimes. But for now, thanks everyone for listening. Thanks to the panel, and I'll see you all later.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Tony. Nice to see you. Bye.